and welcome to Supporting Reading Reactivated. For those that have not been to these sessions before, we're calling them reactivated because they're all topics that we've delivered previously, and these early ones, the first delivery was in 2017, and the reactivated is just the fact that we're revisiting the topic, hopefully making it more flipped, more focused on activities, and more rooted in real experience, because we've had guest speakers each time. We've got one guest speaker, I think, today, and myself, Alistair, and Lillian are kind of revisiting some of the topics that we covered originally. As you'll see on my screen here, there's a link to where you can also go and register on the journeys that we've created. These are all free to access, but you will need to register and follow those steps. And there's a step-by-step guide that you can follow a link to that will talk you through that. We usually collect what you said during registration. I think, Lillian, you summarized this, didn't you?
Yeah, I summarized it. So when I read through what people wanted to gain from this session, more than half of you wanted us to cover how to support students reading in an online learning environment. And that's certainly one of the things that we're going to cover today. That's the key part of what we're covering today. A handful wanted tips to help with the pedagogy of teaching online or supporting staff with online teaching. And I guess what we're doing today is just a subset of that. I mean, we've covered webinars in another webinar, as it were. So feel free to kind of view some of our previous recordings and resources on that. Other people want to know about preparing appropriate academic resources and providing the right support for your students. And a small number just wondered about ebook platforms and apps. And accessibility is a key theme running through all of the requests that came in.
So, Alistair, you're going to share your screen, yeah?
Yep, I'll share my screen now. So just make sure we have the right one coming up. Excellent. I think you can see welcome and introductions. Is that visible now?
Yep.
Excellent. So what I want to do just briefly, if you didn't, well, in fact, could you just in the text chat, if you did get to the first round of the supporting students with online reading and so on, if you got to that 2 years ago, I think, could you pop a yes in the text chat? And if you're new to it, just say new. So a yes or a new. So quite a lot of people knew. Okay, so that's helpful because it gives me a sense as to whether it's a complete waste of time showing you because it's all refreshing, but it looks like for most of you it's going to be useful. So good. So we've allowed a little bit of time just to give you an overview. Now we are going to go through, I'm going to go through this bit quickly for the simple reason that you can come back and look at it in your own time as much as you like. But just to give you that sense of the overview, what is there? So the first thing we started with was the big picture of reading skills, because although we're going to be doing quite a lot about kind of tools and technologies to support reading, it's very important to recognize that reading itself is multi-layered, it's quite complex, and the reading skills that your students lack or might need support with may be due to completely different reasons. So it's important to kind of understand a little bit about how reading nests together. So we've got a little image that I'm showing on the screen here, showing how there's kind of individual reading skills, but there are also socio-cultural elements to reading as well. And some of those you can influence from a teaching and learning point of view, like print exposure, vocabulary knowledge, the use of glossaries and so on. And some of them you can't influence so much. So during this session, we have a look at some of the elements of text, the ironies of text, the alternatives to text, the USPs of text, pedagogical practices, etc., those things. And then towards the end, we'll look at the responsibilities of authors and providers and institutions, because somebody could be experiencing a problem reading purely and simply because the person that created the documents has a problem in putting together documents in an accessible way that is easy to read. So again, in these tabs, we've got some more detail that I'm not going to go into now, but just looking, if you wanted to understand how reading works, what the kind of research about reading tells us in a kind of nutshell, there is a whole list of further reading that you could look at. And some of that is quite cultural and psychological and pedagogical. So the role of encouragement, the role of mindset, the teaching context. So be aware that those things are there. Reading is incredibly important. If you wanted an example of that, it's 168 Spaniards take on 80,000 Incas, and one of the reasons for the Incas losing that particular battle, and there were many reasons, but one of the reasons was that the Spaniard leaders actually had participated in dozens and dozens of battles, not directly, but through their education, through their reading, through being able to read about classical battles, military tactics, and so on. So there's some more information there for you to have a look at there. Text has ironies, because if you were to plot, you know, the preferred medium of people with different disabilities, what you find out is that when you put it all together, text is probably not the preferred medium for most people with disabilities. And yet it's probably the most significant element that we use in further and higher education. And sometimes in the courses I look at universities, I just see this monoculture of text, you know, PDF here, a Word document there. Now there are some USPs, and again, you can look at this in your own time. We highlight out some of the real benefits of text. Go back and have a look at that, because we don't want to throw out babies with bathwaters. We've got some good case studies from the last session on pedagogical practice. But for now, the thing that is really worth you being aware of, and that we will be referring to and practicing, and some of you will actually be taking some of our screens and practicing later, is how we can support the different elements of reading. And this is an interactive mind map. So if you wanted to know more about auto scroll, you would click on that link and it would take you to an appropriate link telling you all about it. So there's loads of really good information there that we would like you to be aware of. And there's also some important responsibilities for authors. When we look at some content later in the section that Ron and Lillian and myself are going to be unpacking with some examples of the same content in different text formats, you will be able to have a look at that and think, how does that apply to me and apply to my content and my work? So I think I will come on to that very shortly. Yeah, let's go on to that now. So I'm going to take you to a new resource in a minute, but just before I do, just be aware that it's not just what the teacher knows, it's not just what an institution, it's also what an institution knows, what an institution trains their staff. So it's a big area. We've got other things that you can look at in there, but in terms of what we're going to focus on today, we are going to be focusing, we've done these bits already, we're going to be focusing on what does the student know that would enable them to be much more productive, comfortable, and effective with any documents that you were to give them. So the starting point here is whether or not your student reading skills pages tell them anything about the things we're going to look at in the next half hour. So if you've got a handy link to your reading skills pages, if you've got a study skills area in your university or in your college, please pop it in the text chat now. And once that's in there, we've got a few here that we've already got, we can add to that. We've given a couple of samples there, but one of the things we'll be really interested in you doing as an outcome from this session is looking at your own areas, your own study skills support on academic reading or any kind of reading skills. Does it cover anything of the things that we're going to be exploring over the next half hour or so? So we're now going to do the guided tour, and we've got a text that Ron put together, It's called Making Text Readable. So it's going to open up a new resource, and Lillian, I think, has put the link in the text chat area. Thank you very much for Lee and Paul putting those links in there. Anybody else that gets any links, really useful, because have a look at what one another have sure that any gaps are filled. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of this text. So this is a separate resource that we've opened up. And in this separate resource, we've got a bit of introductory material at the beginning. And this is where I'm not going to go through all of the details here because we'll be unpacking some of this later. But in terms of you being familiar with this, it gives you text-to-speech information on lots of different tools that you or your students might be reading content on. So you can have a look at that. It gives you some really important information about using inbuilt headings and the navigation that you can get if you do. And so again, in Word, how do you navigate? In Google Docs, how do you get that outline view? In Adobe Reader, in web pages, you can do it with the right tool. We'll be demonstrating that in a moment. E-learning authoring tools, some put together content navigation automatically, some of them don't. And so you might need to add that yourself. So heading, layout, magnification, reflow, navigation, these are the sorts of things that we need to also consider when you create your content for your students. Can they magnify it in such a way that when they get to 400% magnification or whatever a visually impaired student needs, can they still see all the text in the frame of the page, or are they having to scroll left and right to go beyond it? Can they change the colors and the contrasts? Maybe they can do that natively. Maybe, as I will demonstrate instantly now, maybe they do it with a third-party plugin tool, for example. But the issue is, can they do it? Does your tool allow them? And what happens with non-text content? You know, can you put in alt text for images and so on? So we have exactly the same bit of content in all these versions. I think we've got 9 versions: Microsoft Word, PDF, Google Doc, PowerPoint, etc. So all of those. And we're going to be spending some time now talking you through some of the elements of that. And that is where I think I'm going to hand back to Ron to start with some of the trickiest things of all, like how would you know whether or not your particular resource works with a screen reader user? So over to Ron now.
Thanks, Alistair. So yeah, I was conscious as you were going through that it's actually quite an unusual kind of example in terms of all the links that are in that resource are linking to copies of the same content but in those different formats, and obviously that's deliberate, but it kind of, as a consumer of that, means that you're kind of rereading the same information and the same content multiple times. But the point is that we're kind of encouraging you to check those things in whatever formats you use. And a plea, Alistair mentioned that we've got some examples from different tools. We're also providing the download of the assets that we've used, so the little screenshots and the text. And we'd encourage you to create the same resource in whatever tools you regularly use, and if they're not included there. So I think you're seeing my screen here. If I go to the last page just very quickly, I'm conscious that, for instance, we've got an example in Articulate Storyline, but this is from 2017. We don't have an example that's in Storyline 360, I believe it's called, which is a different format and will have different output and different. So if you use tools that are not on this list and you'd be keen to both test them yourself, but also share them back with us, we'd encourage you to do so, and be very keen to hear from you. I'm just going to quickly switch back to the main presentation, and if you've already opened that, you'll have access to this. So just before I use that example to look at the text-to-speech side of things, we're going to look at the text-to-speech and screen reader technology, and we'll come on to the differences between those things with that making text readable resource. But first, a quick introduction. So we have a video here which is less than a minute long and quite a nice summary of text-to-speech. And although I could play it, what we're going to ask you to do is just very quickly follow the link in the text chat and watch that quick overview of text-to-speech. And there's a whole load of other scenarios provided by the W3C site that you might want to watch in your own time, but just watch that video very quickly, and then once it's finished, like I say, it's less than a minute, come back and indicate that it's finished in the text chat, and we'll move on. I won't play it here because you will hear my audio clashing with your own view of that resource. So like I say, if you could all just watch that video and come back as soon as it's finished and let us know. Okay, I'm thinking it should be just about finished. It's only a short video, and obviously you've got access to it to view in your own time. And the most important thing there is as is linked on the screen, there's a number of those perspectives videos, many of which relate to the topic that we're covering today, but also some relate to other accessibility and inclusion topics that you might want to view in your own time. We now have a quick poll. So although I put the questions on screen, I'm going to actually launch the poll and hopefully get everybody to respond. We've got 64 people in the room at the moment, so we'll wait until we've got quite a high percentage of responses. Hopefully everybody's seeing that, and I'll drag that to my shared screen as well. Might take a little while to read the question, I appreciate, but it's really about whether you do any testing at all in terms of text-to-speech or screen reader technologies, and your perception of whether you have any kind of role or responsibility with that. And we'll unpick that as we go. So it's just to get a picture of responses. Hopefully the interaction is being recorded as well, because it'd be useful for that to be. Okay, I can see there's nearly the complete set of responses, a few more people. Okay, maybe some people are signed in but not actually with us. So I think we've got about 94% now, 93%. So I'm going to end the polling so that we can show you the results, or actually, because I'm sharing my screen, you're probably seeing that anyway, but if I end the polling and share the results, I'll just drag that across. So most of you, or the largest percentage, have indicated that you don't test, but you'd like to, you don't know how, or you don't have access to a screen reader, which is kind of what we would have predicted, I think. Alistair, Lynn, you think?
Yeah, I think
so
that's
I'm
right.
going to stop sharing the results, and I'll minimize that, and then just come on to the next little bit. We're going to ask you to try a keyboard shortcut, and as well as suitable software for testing with screen readers and text-to-speech, you do, and this is a kind of key point really, you do have to have a basic knowledge about how to use that particular application, or maybe a combination of applications. And often, because screen readers are used by blind or partially sighted users, the full-blown screen readers that is, you have to have a knowledge of the relevant keyboard shortcuts and the settings of those tools. And that's, you know, I don't know how many keyboard shortcuts you all use on a kind of regular daily basis. But with screen reader software, typically you have to have a good handle on quite a number of them, really. It's not just using the tab key, for instance. So we're going to try a keyboard shortcut, and some of you will know this. And the key point here is repeating the same keyboard shortcut will stop what happens if something indeed does happen. And this will only work for those of you on Windows. But just a key point that repeating the same keyboard shortcut will stop, because it could be quite chaotic if you've never experienced or used this before. So the question is, what happens when you press Control plus Windows key plus Enter? So you can all try that, those that are on Windows, what happens for you? And if you've not used that before, it may be quite a surprise. And what it should be doing is loading up Windows Narrator. And as I say, I'm going to demonstrate that. And one of the reasons we're covering that is that often people perceive that they don't have JAWS on their machine, so they can't test screen reader functionality. But of course, Windows, and most of us will probably be on Windows 10 if we're using Windows. Windows Narrator is built into that, and you know it simply is there for you to use, whether you using it for testing or whether you use it because you want to tap into the functionality that brings. And there's a very good tutorial as part of it as well. So if you've launched that, it may be a bit confusing and you're hearing the text-to-speech reading out to you. Repeat the keyboard shortcuts to stop it and close it, and we'll come on and demonstrate some of how it works. There's a page here with some links to a complete guide to using Narrator and some tips about the keys that you might use when you're using that to test with. And sorry, I'll go back to that. And these are the ones that I'm going to kind of unpick, the particular keyboard shortcuts that I'm going to unpick. There is a little bit, I've noticed a little bit of a clash sometimes with Chrome, so I'm going to use it via Microsoft Edge, because Narrator is a Microsoft product, so it does typically be a bit more reliable with Edge, I think. But it works with Chrome. It's just every now and then it will crash, and I don't want that to happen with the webinar right now. So I'm going to press that keyboard shortcut as well, and hopefully
dialog. Okay. Xerte project text example and 4 more pages. Microsoft Edge window. Xerte project text example. Some samples of this text in other formats from different tools at level TWO. Scan.
So you'll have seen what that's done is instantly read the kind of core properties of this window. And although I've got the task 1 highlighted there's a number of keys that I can use to navigate. So this is a Xerte resource, and typically a Xerte resource and made with this particular template, the XOT template, has what's known as 3 landmark areas. And if I press the D key,
landmark,
it reads first the banner landmark, which is the top one, then the main content,
main landmark,
and then the navigation landmark at the bottom.
Navigation landmark.
And that will vary by what resource and what tool you're looking at as to how many landmarks there are and so on. If I switch to the
Bootstrap project text example, 2 of 5 pane.
If I press that and press the D key on there.
Bootstrap project text example, pages, navigation landmark.
So that's the pages navigation. Now in this example, there's only 1 page, but it would give me access to navigate all the pages in the resource.
Banner landmark. The
next D key will take me to the banner.
Sections, navigation landmark.
And so on. So you get the
main
point.
Landmark.
And the other thing about that main
Xerte project text example, 1 of 5. Xerte project text example.
The other thing about that main landmark there is when a page loads or when you change page, there's a keyboard shortcut to take you straight to the main content. So I can use the caps lock key N.
Main landmark.
And so that's given focus to that main area. And now I can use things like the arrow keys to navigate through the bits of text. So if I use the down arrow.
Comma heading, speak the page text, button. Comma, was speaking, button. Comma, stop speaking, button. Comma heading level. Here you will find links to various examples created with different tools. Each example will open in a new window. If you can try the examples on various devices, including tablets and smartphones.
The other thing that Alistair will demonstrate as well, not necessarily with text-to-speech, but if I press the H key, I can navigate by heading. So in this example, it should quickly go to task 1 and then task 2 and then task 3. And maybe this is when I'm revisiting the resource and I want to quickly get back to a snippet of information or a bit of learning that I want to repeat. But just to demonstrate that, if I press the H key.
Task 1, heading level 3. Task 2, heading level 3. Task 3, heading level 3.
So you get the point that there's lots of different keyboard shortcuts that you can use to navigate efficiently, and that's the kind of thing most people will be familiar that you can use the tab key. And if I use the tab key, what will happen is it will navigate via the through the links and the controls in the resource. So I'll just demonstrate that.
Link, download the text and images. Hide footer tools, full screen. Accessibility options, this button will open a dialog window button.
And if I press the shift and tab key, it will go back in reverse order
Full
through
screen
those things.
button. Hide footer tools. Link, download, link, H5P.
Now the other thing, if I very quickly navigate back to the navigation area down the bottom there, I can get to that quickly by pressing the D key.
Navigation landmark.
And then if I tab.
Hide footer tools, full screen. Accessibility options, this button will open a dialog window. But contents, this button will open a dialog window. But back button. See all your tabs button. Off navigation landmark.
So the key point about that is, although that's working and it's tabbing through, you may find that in some resources and some tools, those buttons are tabbed to, but they don't actually give you a useful description of what you've landed on and what that button will achieve or do. And you'll find that certainly in these Xerte resources, and it's one of the reasons we use Xerte, is that's all kind of there and built in for you. You don't have to do anything to achieve that. All the buttons and things are properly coded so that you don't have to worry about it and you don't have to have the technical knowledge to achieve that. The other thing, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Meeting Zoom window to toolbar parameter. Exiting narrator.
Okay, I'm going to exit narrator there, but I'm going to share my mobile screen instead. If I can quickly find that, share my mobile screen, and hopefully this will work okay. And this may affect your Zoom window size. I think Lillian, you said that it turned it to portrait, didn't you?
Yeah, but it's okay. You just have to move
your
good. Zoom screen out of the way. It seems to be split down the middle. Okay.
So we've covered what a blind or partially sighted user might use a full-blown screen reader for. And although Windows Narrator isn't typically the tool of choice for someone that's blind or partially sighted, it is the same kind of fully fledged. It will allow you to operate the whole operating system and navigate anything that opens, any windows, any tools, and so on, rather than just something that enables you to hear the text. But of course, what we've all got the ability to benefit from, and as was quickly summarized in that video we got you to watch, is that there's the kind of text-to-speech end of this, where if you've got some text on screen, you may have a preference or a need to hear that text read to you rather than read it. And so I've got my iPhone here, and if I just press and hold and select a piece of text, hopefully you can just about see that. And when I let go, it will give me the ability to press the speak button and I can listen to that.
Similar examples have been created with different authoring.
So I didn't deliberately didn't select the whole sentence there, but you get the point. And I think Alistair is going to cover the same kind of thing in other tools or on his Android devices. Might not be able to share the screen live, but at least that that will cover the fact that you can do this on most mobile devices. The other thing that's part of consumption of text and reading of text on mobile devices is the fact that how that resource reflows and displays on mobile devices. So we're looking at the Xerte XOT resource here, but I've got the others loaded up as well. So if I just very quickly switch to the Bootstrap version of the Xerte resource, remember this is the same text content, but it's in a different format, created with the same tool but a different template and a different output, and you can see the way that works. And if you're testing compatibility and readability of text, then obviously that kind of thing comes into play that you perhaps need to be aware of and test in terms of it's all well good looking on a large screen laptop or desktop or even a tablet, but how does it work and how readable is it on a mobile device? If I look at the other e-learning examples that we've got, so look at this one. I think this one is the H5P example. What you'll find is that there's quite often, if I turn this round, it might look better, so I can turn that to the landscape. You'll find there's kind of typically...
Ron, I'm not sure
showing,
where...
for
I'm not sure
landscape
it's
images.
turning around with your...
Okay,
screen.
if I turn it portrait, is it showing again?
No,
No,
you might have to share it again.
Yeah, we've got a slightly split screen with the Xerte object on the leftish, and then on the right 1330 strategies to support. So I think it almost looked like it had a mix of your computer, laptop as well.
Okay, I'm going to try it again then. Sorry about that. Okay, are you seeing my...
I can see
that's
it.
better.
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay, so I'm not sure at what point it stopped sharing, but this is the H5P resource, and the point I was going to make is that you quite often find with e-learning authoring tools, there's two types. There's the kind of output that doesn't necessarily reflow the text, but has some advantages in terms of it keeps the relative position of everything, and the kind of overall design is not impacted because it doesn't reflow. On the other hand, actually it's quite difficult when it doesn't reflow and doesn't resize to consume that particularly on smaller devices. But we're not going to kind of criticize tools here. We're just covering the kind of things that you need to be aware of. So if I open the Storyline resource, for instance, you can see the way that looks in comparison. And again, I won't do it, but I could turn that landscape and on my device, it would probably look better and work better and the text would be more readable. But these are the things that you kind of need to test against, or at least get feedback from learners in terms of the resources you're using, or particularly the resources you're creating, but certainly the resources you're using as well, as to how readable that text is, whether it's actually even practical for learners to read on their kind of devices. And of course, it's not an exact science because there are tablets that are smaller than some mobile phones and some mobile phones that are old and won't have the same kind of resolution or compatibility. I'm going to stop sharing my mobile screen now and go back to the Xerte screen. Okay. So that was a very quick overview of narrator and text-to-speech functionality. We do have a summary here, and although it's specific to Xerte and there's some general tips as well, Lillian made the point that that's not very good design. There's lots of text in there. Well, this is meant for you, not as a presentation resource, but for you to consume those kind of key points in your own time. So that's deliberate. And if you saw that in a kind of standard web page, you perhaps wouldn't question the amount of text. But because it's in this kind of landscape, almost slideshow format, perhaps you will. But of course, it is a navigator, which is another thing that I'm sure Alistair will touch on. that the navigators help you break down much longer chunks of text into slightly more navigable, even though in this case there is still arguably quite a lot of text for you to consume in the one page, in the single page. But you might not question that if it was in a long scrolling web page. Lillian, did you want me to keep my screen sharing and you were going to talk about this?
I think I was going to do the next bit and then Lillian come on to that.
Oh, okay.
If that's all right.
You want to share your screen, Alistair?
Yep, I'll share my screen. That's going to stop your screen sharing. Apologies for that. And what I wanted to look at was just some of the key things that people sometimes don't know about, and certainly students don't necessarily know about, that can make a really big difference. And for many of you, these will be teaching grannies to suck eggs, so I apologize. But and I think, I'm just trying to see whether or not it's possible for me to remote control. Okay, who would like control of my screen for a moment? Pop in the text chat. Who wants to be able to control Alistair's screen? Doesn't look like anybody's awake. Then I can. So Debbie. Okay, so I'm going to find Debbie. Scroll down to Debbie. There's Debbie. So you should. It says waiting for Debbie Spencer to control your screen. Let me know when you can control. Wait, that's amazing. That's brilliant. Okay, so what we have here is a very typical document that a student might be reading, a very long document. And you can see on the right-hand side under sections, on the right hand, that's right. So you can see there's a certain navigation, which is great, but a lot of online content wouldn't have that at all. And even if it does, that's often quite granular. Now I'm going to give Debbie a new instruction now. So Debbie, up on the, just above where it says references, there's a speaker cone icon. And then to the left of the speak, just go up a little bit to where all the little icons are. There's one that looks like a black speaker, and just to the left of that, there's two angle brackets with an H in it. That's the headings map. Can you click on that, Debbie? What that does is on any web page that has got, effective structuring on it, it brings you up a map of the navigation. And if you compare what Debbie's got on the left-hand side there, with all those, all that very granular linkages. So for instance, Debbie, if you look at data collection tools on the left, multiple choice questionnaires and so on, you can click on any of those, you'll instantly go there. That level of granular navigation isn't even shown in the table of contents on the right-hand side. That's the supplier put in. So I just wanted people to be aware of that as a tool, and there's other tools that do this. This is Headings Map tool for Firefox and also for Chrome, and there are others like HTML5 Outliner. And now while we've got Debbie, if you just just leave the mouse for a second, because I'm going to give you some other tasks to do. I'm going to bring across a document, and then. So that was the thing you probably don't know about. The thing that I think a lot of you will know about, and then I'll hand over to Debbie again now. Debbie, I'd like you to find the navigation pane. I expect you know how to do that, but if you don't, and certainly loads of students don't, Debbie, that's absolutely right. View, and then the navigation pane is right a bit, 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 there, down. You've just passed it. Navigation pane is a little checkbox. If you click on that, any document that's been structured with inbuilt heading styles will allow you to do what we see here. So a student with a disability wanting to know about effective text descriptions can instantly click on the left-hand side down at effective text descriptions, and they can get to wherever they need in the document in a single click. Now that doesn't just help Screenreader users, that helps everybody. And then the last thing I'm going to do, because I think a lot of you will know that sort of stuff, but I bet a lot of your students don't. So, and then the next thing I'm going to do, Debbie, if you can just hold still for a second, I'm just going to pull across on here, document. Okay, so here's a PDF document. Debbie, you can do exactly the same thing in terms of the navigation, but in this case, you want to click on the little bookmark bar on the left-hand column above the paper clip on the left-hand menu. And if you click on that, again, if this document has been put together effectively using heading styles, and then in fact, this was originally a Word document with heading styles, you can save from a Word document with heading styles. You can save that by ensuring you click the option to turn headings into bookmarks, and instantly you've got brilliant navigation for your students as well. So that's excellent. And the other thing about heading styles, about navigation on a PDF shown in Adobe Reader ought also to be able to reflow. So Debbie, the last thing I'm going to ask you to do now is click on View up at the top, and then Zoom, and then down the bottom of the submenus, Reflow, right down the bottom. And then just close down the bookmarks view for the minute, because that's cluttering a little bit. Now, can you change the magnification? Use either Control Plus, or you can see the 142%. Yeah, make that bigger, make that 400 or something. Click on the drop down. Yeah, perfect, that's fine. And then if you just scroll down, what we can see is that we've got that high magnification, but you're not having to scroll left and right. You can achieve exactly the same in Microsoft Word, but not in the print view. You have to turn it to the web page view. Debbie, I think big round of applause for everybody for being my glamorous assistant. Thank you very much, Debbie. That's been excellent. And that's where I'm going to end. So I'm going to take my control back and pass over to Lillian.
Okay, so I'll happily share my screen, I think, Ron. I am going to run through really the aspects of, let me just make sure I've got the screen up. Okay, so this particular page, which I think we can share directly in the chat, is where I'd like you to kind of go to shortly. First of all, the things that Alistair has been explaining about using the structure of a document, etc. It's all in line with our kind of accessible documents kind of training with the 2018 regulations on digital accessibility and so on and so forth. So when staff and students understand how to create structured documents, accessible and structured documents, it leads to a lot of flexibility, right? So one of the things that happens when someone is, for instance, has special needs or has other needs when it comes to reading, and someone confirmed that you can see this link that I've just jumped into.
Yep.
So I do apologize if you happen to have dyslexia, because this is possibly distressing for you. But this is a simulator of what it's like if you don't have dyslexia. This is a simulator for what it feels like. It's hard to pin down what the words are. Letters seem to jiggle about. There's a little bit of animation. So from what we know, that when you've got dyslexia, being able to change background colors or font colors, contrast, leading, which is the space between lines, how wide text is across the screen, fonts, all that can really help. So having a structured document really helps. So what I'd like you to do is, again, I don't think I managed to put in the correct URL earlier. If you go onto that page and play this video, so rather than listening to me demonstrate it now, you're going to play the video for 3 minutes 22, and so you'll be coming back here and then we'll carry on with this webinar. So if you follow that link and play that video. Okay. Okay, so I think for most of you, it will be back. And this is a resource, obviously, you can share with other staff and also with learners. Useful for them to understand that Word documents could be quite easy to use on mobile and much more flexible. Thanks for watching that, and feel free to obviously share this resource with others. So what I'm going to do next is to ask a brave volunteer, and I think speaking to Lou earlier, I think Lou said she'd happily try this out for me. Lou's going to go to a website to show you how she can implement simple reading basically on her Firefox, right? Lou, are you there with us?
Hello.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to stop share, Lou, so you can share your screen.
Okay. That one. Go.
And just demonstrate this concept of simple reading. So this was new to Lou as well. We just ran through it earlier today. What browser are you using, Lou, there?
Firefox.
Yep, Firefox. And we had a website we found that was about reading.
Yeah.
Critical reading from University of Leicester. We're not picking on anybody. It's just a nice site to demonstrate, actually. So I think what you can see on your screen now that Lou's sharing is, you know, the typical 3-column. There's quite a lot of words, quite a lot of text. There's navigation on the left, and there's other distracting things on the right. So using Simple Reader then, Lou, how would you do this?
It is up in the bar at the top, this little icon here with the one that looks like a page, basically. So just click. Boom.
And there you go. You can simplify that reading. Now, any of you have accidentally wandered into a clickbait page like the Daily Mail or Daily Mirror, this is really, really useful. It takes away all the advertising, okay? And Lou will demonstrate being able to change the background color on the left of the browser.
So,
Lou, on the left of the browser. Yeah.
Did it work?
Yeah, that's it. That's just updating now. So you can change your background color, font size with a plus button and that kind of thing. So things like that, thank you very much, Lou. Things like that are very valuable as skills for anybody, staff and students, when it comes to reading on screen. And I use this type of thing all the time in my daily working life. And with staff and students spending so much time on screen, this is certainly something we should share with them. And being able to get it read back out to them as well. As you can see on the left-hand side, there's a kind of audio icon. It's possible to get text read back out to you by your browser. Okay, so thanks very much, Lou, and we're going to carry on with the rest of the program.
Cool.
Ron, will you share screen again?
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, so I think we've just got the final few things. For those that have been at the webinars before, you'll recognize what we do here is just some quick tips about what to do next steps, but then also an activity that we'd like you to do. So if you're not already, please join our mailing list. If you're interested in the next one, which follows on very kind of directly from this one, is strategies support writing, and the date is now confirmed of Wednesday the 27th of May at 1 p.m. GMT, and the registration form is actually on our live on our resource as well, so you can already register for that. We usually have this kind of guide. I mentioned it at the beginning that we have a step-by-step guidance to how to access our journeys, which are mini courses in a virtual learning environment called Pedit. So I won't talk through that. You can access that in your own time and register on the site. There's some information about us, the three of us, and if you're interested in any kind of additional support with making use of future teacher resources or running CPD events yourselves in your own organisation, we'd certainly be keen to hear from you. We ask you to do one thing, but I'll come back to that very quickly. In this particular resource, we have a knowledge check. And a big focus of this revisited session that we've had today is about doing those tests, going through that, making text readable. If you're more advanced, perhaps using the assets to create resources in whatever tools you use. But certainly for everybody to run through the same kind of checks and accessibility checks and check in those features and functionality that we've covered as to whether that works for you. And if you do that, then there's also a little quiz at the end here that kind of helps you kind of assess your understanding and progress with those things. And at the end of that, I won't go through it, but at the end of that, you'll also see a results page with the answers that you can download if you wanted to, just to see how that functionality works. The final page is just a page about our use of Xerte and a link, the Creative Commons license and so on. So what we always ask people to do as a final activity is to share what one thing you will do as a result of what we looked at today. And of course, it's kind of taken for granted that you'll perhaps revisit the resources and so on. So try to be as specific as you can. And also in the text chat, once you've done that, if you want to raise any questions, we've still got a few minutes left. And we'll also, once we stop the recording, usually have a bit of an informal chat as well. So please indicate in the text wall on the resource, not on my shared screen. So I'll put a direct link to that in the text chat. So you'll need to use the resource rather than my shared screen. Just add one thing you'll do. Now, we're not seeing any responses. Are you seeing any responses, Lillian? It may be we've hit a snag. So if the text wall doesn't work for you, just put those responses of what one thing you'll do in the Zoom text chat instead.
And if people are okay to stay on for a couple of minutes, as soon as you've had a chance to put in your what one things, there was a little bit about Blackboard Ally came up, and I have been doing some work with a university recently on exploring what Blackboard Ally did, how Blackboard Ally kind of made conversions with different types of documents and what the relative advantages and disadvantages were, so that we could give guidance to students. So I've got a table based on that work, which I'm happy to share with you just in a few moments. So I'll give you a chance to fill in your what one thing, and then if you want to stay on for just a couple of minutes, I can talk through what my findings were, because it may be that there'll be some useful content that you could take back to your own institution and for your own students. Indeed, do think about using some of the links that are embedded in this resource for your own students. That mind map in particular has a huge range of tools, techniques, tips, etc., that would help lots of different aspects of reading support.
A reminder as well for those that have a kind of remit for this, if you use particular tools that we've not created examples for, and you'd be keen to use the assets that we've provided to create the same resource but in a different tool, then we'd be keen for you to do that and share that back with us so we can embed it in the resource. Obviously it's a very simple example in a way, but it's a good way of kind of comparing and at least covering the kinds of things you should look for.
Neil's asking if they're happy to reuse some of these resources for a webinar. Yes, absolutely. Feel free to kind of repurpose and send people on to view this resource as well. And any, we have such a huge range of resources, back catalogue of resources, all built around accessibility as well. So, so feel free to kind of send people to the site. I'll add the site into our web chat again.
And if we're ready, and if people, anybody that can stay on for a couple of minutes, I'm very happy to share what I found so far about Blackboard Ally conversions. Now, obviously, this is based on a small sample size in one institution, but what it does do is it does kind of give you a sense as to when you might advise the student to simply use the original document and not bother converting it, because it may be that the student's basic problem was that they didn't know how to make best use of the tool they already had, or when it would be genuinely better to change. So anyway, I'll offer this, I'll share my screen now, and I'll offer this just as some observations that might be useful.
Do you want this to be part of the recording, Alistair, or should I?
Yes, I think it would be worth being part of the recording.
Okay.
So
not quite outtakes, the intakes.
Yeah, the intakes. I'm just going to change my screen share then, so that will be over to me. Is that okay?
Yeah.
This is completely unprompted. It was just something seeing about Blackboard Ally and the powerful tool that it is to make conversions. You still cannot assume that a student will know which is the best conversion to make for their particular needs. So what I did here's the first thing I did. I took the original Word version of a module handbook, and the module handbook in its original version had very limited headings present. So the first thing to note is if there are accessibility limitations in the original document, you're not going to get any improvement. So the tagged PDF that I thought, oh, will it find those headings from the typography? No, it didn't. Will it find it for the HTML or for the EPUB? No. So basically, you know, it's a bit garbage in, garbage out. If you start with an inaccessible document, you would just end up with varying shades of inaccessible alternative formats. However, that phrase various shades is very important, because although the technology can't automatically add headings, what was interesting is that there were other things that it did do very well. I'll come to those in a minute. The other thing that was interesting was that something like magnification and reflow. Actually, the very best experience of magnification and reflow was on the original module handbook in Word, making sure that the students knew about viewing with the web layout. If they viewed with web layout or with the immersive reading tools, that would give them a really good example. What I've done, I've highlighted in yellow the best option for that particular access need. Color changes, well, there's no doubt that Word gave good color change options. So does a PDF, if you know where to find it under the Edit Preferences Accessibility menu. Plugins can with HTML. Actually, if you want the really best option, an EPUB 3 in Calibre is fantastically, it's literally hundreds of, probably thousands of variations, but it's probably over the top for most. So Word is pretty good. Line, column, and word spacing, if that was important to somebody, all of your EPUB options would be better, unless you are reading the EPUB in Adobe Digital Editions, which is awful and has no color change options. But an EPUB in Thorium, Calibre, or Bluefire Reader, or Vital Source, any of these other tools and apps that read EPUB, loads better for column, line, and word spacing. Text to speech, the built into Word, that was the best of all. So depending on a student's need, they may or may not be advised to use the original document or to download it into another. The next experiment was when I took a PDF. Now, I took a PDF which happened to have good navigation. It did have some bookmarks, so that was good. So it was actually the best thing to do was to either access it through the Chrome browser, because when I clicked on the link for that PDF, it automatically opened in the browser. Looking in Chrome, and other browsers do it too, there's a little icon that drops down all your table of contents, all your headings. If that's present, it's as good to use that as any. Alternatively, I downloaded the PDF. The heading navigation did carry across to the Ally HTML download, and it showed in the headings map plugin for Firefox, but funnily enough, not in Chrome. So you may get slight quirks there. And the EPUB export didn't pick it up at all, which was interesting. Magnification and reflow, the best option for this PDF that I exported was through the Thorium Reader or Calibre or Bluefire. Basically, the EPUB option was best. The HTML option was very good for reflow of text, but all the images were stripped out. In fact, that happened in the EPUB version as well. So reflow is a bit more problematic, because if you need the images, then and you need the magnification and reflow, there wasn't actually anything that was ideal, and you would almost need to look at the original with the images in it, and then look at the the reflowed text. But that's really messy. Color changes, probably, well, almost certainly the best changes were through the EPUB readers. PDF was good in Adobe Reader. Adobe Reader does have a pretty good basic range of colors, probably is it 16 palettes or something like that. not bad at all. Firefox Midnight Lizard plugin was pretty good as well. Line and column spacing, we're back to the EPUB is the best. And text to speech, actually the text to speech, the HTML download from Ally, read in Edge or with a plugin like Selection Reader in Chrome, gave the best experience. But equally, if you've got Claro Read or Read and Write Gold, probably any of those would work pretty well with a commercial text-to-speech tool. So that was my findings. I cannot pretend that it would apply to all documents, all PDFs created from all different workflows, but I think beginning to get a sense that a student will need guidance as to how to use Ally effectively to meet their needs is important, because you can spend lots of money on a really good tool, and Ally is a good tool. It's not perfect, but it's good. But you can spend that money and not get the return on investment because a student simply has never heard of an EPUB, doesn't know how to use it, or a student doesn't know that Word itself has got all these features in, or Adobe Reader's got those features. So I'll end there. Hopefully that's been useful to one or two people.
So thanks, Alistair. So I mean, I think most people will be kind of like, ooh, is this document available to anyone, or is your own research? Should we be aiming to recreate something like that ourselves?
Okay, so the document is from a report for a client, so I probably can't let it go as is.
No, but I guess the structure is quite useful.
I'd be happy, more than happy to let people have that. And the other thing is you could get completely different findings, depending on how the original document was put together. But certainly I'm more than happy to put that onto the JISC Teams accessibility list, and I'll send it around the future teacher list as a layout or something.
I think it's a really useful framework. I was thinking about doing something like that, but I struggled to kind of decide what was, comparable, if you like. And when I tried EPUB readers, I couldn't decide which EPUB readers to try either. So just seeing your list there was quite useful. So yeah, that's really, really good. I did a thing where I, again, for people who at my uni who maybe didn't have access to or didn't want to have to learn a screen reader, I suggested that they use like Ally as a shortcut to see what Ally would do, in terms of the audio file that came back. And I was told by Ally that they use, let me see, who do they use? They use a kind of reader. I can't remember, I can't see it off the top of my head, but I did ask them like what Screenreader was being used to kind of generate the audio file, because the audio file is quite accessible. It's not just the text that's being read, the structure is being read as well. Which is quite good. So the link that I've added, that resource is like something I use to demonstrate to people why having table headers is so important, because Ally picked that up, and the way it structured the information in a table when it was reading it back out, it was really quite good.
That's an interesting point, because one of the things that I've noticed is a kind of quirkiness between different conversion tools. So for example, I was a little bit disappointed that Blackboard Ally hadn't, in the experiment I did, it hadn't picked up that there were very clear typographic headings, formatted headings in the document, and it hadn't kind of looked at those and thought, oh, that looks like a heading 1 and that looks like a smaller heading. It hadn't done that. Census Access did. I sent a similar document to Census Access, and it actually did a pretty good job of interpreting the structure, the semantic structure from the typographic structure. However, what was interesting is when I did a slightly different thing and I was looking at a PDF that didn't reflow at all well, I sent a PDF. Sometimes you reflow a PDF and all the gaps between the words disappear, and you end up with just one block of a single word, 20 pages long. Now, that's a very common issue on reflowing PDFs. I sent one of those through Blackboard, and it came back beautifully reflowing. So there's these slightly different things, different tools do different things in different ways.
So I think the Blackboard one did OCR as well, probably. That's why, yeah.
It's also important to in that equation, Alistair, to keep in mind how the, you know, what the PDF was created with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
As we've discussed before, it's very different creating PDFs from Word than it is from creating them with other tools.
Lee's asking, does BBA, Blackboard Ally, use Read Speaker for text-to-speech? I don't know. I'm not sure.
I think I asked the question, and I that rings a bell. So it could be that is what they use, because I certainly did ask the question about, yeah.
You wanted to take his jest, didn't you? You wanted to hear that lovely Scottish, Lancashire voice. Right. Well, I think probably, how many people have we still got? 17 people who are desperate for dinner, but so passionate and committed that they're still with us.